Ready? I think we're ready. Good morning and welcome back. The time is now 8:30 and I'd like to call the March 21st, 22nd, 2024 meeting of the Energy Facility Siting Council back to order. Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Cindy Condon,
Here.
Marcy Grail,
Here.
Ann Byer,
Here.
Katie Himes,
Here.
Marcy Grail.
Again?
Did I get that already? Sorry. I'm like skipping over the people who aren't here, so I think Richard Devlin.
Present remotely.
There we go. You have a quorum, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Now, are there any agenda modifications this morning?
Madam Vice Chair, there are no agenda modifications at this time.
Thank you. I have the following announcements. Please mute your phones, and if you are joining us by phone and receive a phone call, please hang up from this call and dial back in after finishing your other call. For those who signed onto the webinar, please do not broadcast your webcam. For agenda items D and F, the contested case rulemaking, public hearing, and the public comment period, there are two ways to let us know you are interested in providing comments to the council. For those using the WebEx, you will need to use the raise your hand feature. For those on the phone only, you will need to press *3, which will alert us that you want to speak. We will go over these options again during that agenda item. If you want to receive future email notifications of council meetings, project milestones, or rulemakings through our Click Dimensions program, you can do so by clicking on the link in the agenda or on the council webpage. Look for the green box on the right-hand side of the page that says sign up for emails updates. You are also welcome to access the online project mapping tool and any documents by visiting the website. Please note that the audio and video of this meeting are being recorded and may be posted to the council's website following the meeting. Energy Facility Siting Council meetings shall be conducted in a respectful and courteous manner where everyone is allowed to state their positions at the appropriate times consistent with council rules and procedures. Willful, accusatory, offensive, insulting, threatening, insolent, or slanderous comments which disrupt the council meeting are not acceptable. Pursuant to Oregon Administrative Rule 345-011-0080, any person who engages in unacceptable conduct which disrupts the meeting may be expelled. We'll move on to the consent calendar. And first, did everybody get a chance to read the February minutes?
Yes.
Great. Do I have a motion to approve?
Yes.
Sure. Councilor Grail.
Madam Vice Chair, I move that the council, for the record, this is Marcy Grail. Madam Vice Chair, I move that the council approve the minutes of the February 23rd, 2024 meeting as presented and recommended by staff.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ann Byer, second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, all in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Richard, you and I
Aye.
on the minute? Thank you. The February minutes are approved. And now the council secretary report. Secretary Cornett.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So first starting with council member updates. So at the last council meeting, I had reported that council member Chuck Toots' first term ended on March 15th of this year, and that he had requested to serve a second term. Unfortunately, it was my mistake. His term actually ends March 15th of 2025. So I had incorrectly had his information in my tracking tool. And so he doesn't come up for reappointment until next year. On the positive side, he's already put his information in, executive appointment said he doesn't need to redo it. So he's all set for next year. So while it was an unfortunate mistake, didn't have really any, time ramifications.
So just a question on that, because it was in the minutes. No, this will serve as
This
okay.
will correct
Right.
the minutes reflect what the minutes
Yeah,
were,
absolutely.
were unfortunately incorrect, but now we'll have it on the minutes and that's why I wanted to put it on these meeting minutes to correct that.
Okay, thank you.
On to project updates. As I had reported at the last meeting, we received the notice of intent for the Summit Ridge Renewable Energy Facility in northeastern Wasco County. This would be a 201 megawatt wind, solar, and battery storage facility. Public notice was issued on March 14th, and a public comment period is open until May 3rd. We will be holding a public informational meeting on the project on April 3rd at the Dufur K-12 School Gymnasium, starting at 5 p.m. So if council members are interested in attending, please let me know, either in person or virtually. We certainly encourage attendance, or tracking that. The only limitation would be, if we end up having 4, that would be a quorum and we'll have to deal with that. But if there are 3 or less, that is certainly not an issue. Also, I had reported at the last meeting on the Summit Ridge Wind Farm, which is largely the same as the new Summit Ridge Renewable Energy Facility. That project has submitted their request to terminate the site certificate. So once they submitted that information, we evaluated it. There was missing information, so we didn't provide the notice that's required after we received that. We've since received all of the required information and sent a notice on March 13th with a public comment period that concludes on April 1st. So unless something changes, we are on track to have that in front of council at the next council meeting on April 19th for your review and possible termination of the site certificate. Next, MIST amendment number 13. So this is for the MIST underground natural gas storage facility. This project is an operational natural gas storage facility located on approximately 5,472 acres. It has a permitted daily natural gas throughput of 635 million standard cubic feet. It is comprised of underground natural gas storage reservoirs, compressor stations, gathering pipelines, O&M facilities, and a gas transmission pipeline. The project was originally approved in 1981, has been amended 12 times, and the certificate holder is Northwest Natural. Amendment number 13 proposes to replace and upgrade the 2 natural gas fired compressors, replace and upgrade an underground electrical power supply, create a 7.5 acre construction laydown area that will be converted to a permanent storage after construction, develop 4 existing storage reservoirs, including above ground well pads to increase natural gas storage capacity, so increasing the amount that they can store at the site. Install injection and withdrawal wells and transmission pipelines, install 3 reciprocating natural gas fired compressors, install 2 natural gas dehydration equipment systems, and construct a new control and operations buildings. So we just received this. It will very soon be added to the project page where the amendment can be looked at, and we'll be sending out the notice very soon as well. Next on my list is the Klamath Falls Energy Center. Earlier this week, we received the money for the notice of intent, and I didn't get verification if we received the actual notice of intent, but it was intended to come in this week. So this would be a 400 megawatt solar PV and battery storage project located approximately 9 miles west of Klamath Falls on private land that is zoned forest. So this would be our first solar project zoned on forest zone land versus exclusive farm use zone land. Project would be located on 7,350 acres, although the solar footprint itself would be about 4,300 acres or 6.3 square miles. The developer is Savion, which is a division of the Royal Dutch Shell Company. We have yet to create a web page for that, or obviously put the notice of intent on there. But that'll all be coming soon, as well as establishing a date, time, location for a public information meeting, which would likely be in Klamath Falls. So that will be coming soon. Any questions before I?
I'm sorry. This is Chair Grill, I apologize. I just said, oh, if we go to Camp Clayton Falls, I've not seen Perry in person before.
It'll be a great opportunity. One update on a compliance issue. So this is for the Reed College Nuclear Research Reactor. So at 11:43 a.m. on March 7th of this year, an operator trainee operating the research reactor under the direction of a licensed operator initiated a planned manual scram. Following the planned manual scram, the licensed operation or operator did not turn off the console switch or remove the key from the console. So they basically did a test. They kind of walked away and left literally the key in the ignition. So the reactor did not meet the definition of reactor secured as a result of that action. So the license operator then left the control room, securing the door on their way out at 12 p.m. So this started at 11:43 a.m. Basically, 17 minutes later, a licensed senior reactor operator entered the control room, found the key in the console with the switch in the operate position. They turned the switch off, secured the key, logged the action, notified the director. So throughout the duration of the event, all the control rods were fully inserted. So we don't spend much time really talking about the Oregon State University or the Reed College research reactors. So these are small research reactors, but they are nuclear reactors. And the Reed one particularly is largely run by students. So obviously there are senior people who have oversight over that, but there's a lot of work that's done by the actual students in that program. So the Oregon Department of Energy, on behalf of the Energy Facility Siting Council, was not timely notified per OAR 345-030-0010 sub 2, which requires prompt notification by telephone of the occurrence of any incident or condition relating to the operation of the reactor that could have prevented a nuclear system from performing its safety functions as described in the technical specification. So they basically should have let us know what happened. So Max Woods, who most of you know pretty well, who is now the Assistant Director for Nuclear Safety and Emergency Preparedness, he has been in contact with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They were timely notified of this incident. So while we were not, they were. Per council's rules, if there is a follow-up report to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, then FSEC will receive a copy of that report. So very likely, Reed will create a report, send it to NRC, and then we will get a copy of that, and then we will provide that to you. So right now, well, in the near future, we've requested that Max reach out to the Reed College staff to set up a meeting to have a conversation about what those protocols should or shouldn't be to make sure that we do receive proper notification if there is a future incident.
Question. This is Vice Chair Con. So they didn't notify us timely. So what? Did they just notify National Regulatory Commission in lieu of us and just we were forgotten in the?
I believe we were just forgotten it. So, obviously the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, if there are nuclear facilities, have staff, and there's a lot of, I think, connection between these facilities and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They have most of the oversight, but there is a site certificate, there is that requirement. So, I mean, I can't say why we weren't notified. That's a requirement. They should have done it. So that's why we just want to make sure we have a meeting with them and kind of go over, remind them you have a site certificate. There are these administrative rules which require you to do certain things. And the council does have, some oversight, not as much as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, nor should we, but being, at the state level, I think it's appropriate. It was deemed to be appropriate a long time ago, and they need to be adhering to those requirements.
What is the time?
Prompt.
Just as soon as.
Yeah, we have some, that say 72 hours or, others specified. But the language of this one, I think, is literally just prompt notification by telephone. So,
Thank you.
all right, moving on to legislative updates. So the short session finished, and I've given updates on a couple or a few bills, so I'll give the final version of those bills. So House Bill 4015 would define, or did define, battery energy storage systems in FSEC definitional statutes. So it still didn't create a regulatory path, either at the state level or the local level. I guess it did some degree create it at the state level. But this is for standalone battery storage systems, which are not FSEC jurisdictional. They weren't before and they aren't now. What the bill did is it defined it in, what a battery energy storage system is, and then it creates an opt-in by developers. There's currently, for other facilities that are less than FSEC jurisdictional, there is option for the developers to opt into FSEC. There are also options for the local governments to defer to FSEC after consultation with the developer. So that's what the bill did. I think there's a likelihood moving forward that there are going to be standalone battery energy storage systems. Council has reviewed, I just pulled the numbers recently, about 4 gigawatts of battery energy storage, active battery energy storage systems right now. These are related and supporting facilities. So they're not your jurisdiction because it's a battery energy storage. It's your jurisdiction because it's part of a wind or solar or natural gas project that is your jurisdiction. So it'd be something like an O&M building or a transmission line. So that's why, we have so much review of these. But, if somebody came in today and said, I want to build a, standalone battery energy storage project, it's not FSEC jurisdictional unless they opt in.
Councillor Byer.
Just a quick question. If a developer opts in for a standalone battery storage facility, do we apply our typical siting standards?
Yes,
Okay.
it would be, there's no difference in process,
Okay, thank you.
and there's no difference in the standards that would apply.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Councillor Devlin.
if they did an independent battery storage and it was not subject to our approval, whose review would it be under?
It would be the local government's review. So either the city or the county within whose jurisdiction the project would be located.
Okay.
And then subject to whatever the zoning ordinance is for that particular zone, whether it's exclusive farm use or industrial or commercial. To my knowledge, the only standalone battery energy storage system that exists in Oregon is in Salem. Portland General Electric owns it. It's in city limits. Not FSEC jurisdictional. We several years ago toured the facility, which was interesting. But so they can be located pretty much anywhere. That's in a building, and there's a bunch of batteries sort of on racks, more like a server room is what it looks like. But we're obviously seeing ones out on the landscape that are more like in containers. So there are variations in the way these things are developed, but I think at least the ones that are coming to FSEC as part of others are more in these sort of container unit type situations.
So, Councillor Condon again, a follow-up to Councillor Devlin's. As these proliferate or could proliferate, do you know if there was any discussion about possible FSEC jurisdiction just for these standalone units that are bigger? I mean, we've got some experience certainly with assessing them. Any idea on the conversations that took place?
I don't know that anybody was advocating for FSEC jurisdictional or FSEC jurisdiction, sort of right out of the gate. We'll see how these move forward. We've had some projects where, they've been quite large in terms of the physical footprint. So, we'll see if that translates into, the legislature or others wanting. And I know, I think at least from the development community, they want the opt-in option. But, I think probably local governments, and in fact, there were quite a few tracking the bill, quite a few local governments that participated and commented, and they did not like the opt-in provision. They wanted to retain jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
One last question.
Councillor Devlin.
This is just a hypothetical, but in most cases, if a party built a battery storage, it would be receiving power from one of their other facilities in a different location. Has there been any instance that you know of, maybe not in Oregon, of somebody siting a battery storage in an area with low power rates, like a co-op, storing the power and then reselling it when the market is at the highest prices?
So for the record, Todd Cornett, thank you, Councilmember Devlin. No, I'm not aware of the circumstances. I mean, the way that it's articulated, and this is not necessarily the entire universe of possibilities, but the way it's typically articulated is, as we're moving towards renewable, more reliance on renewable energy, which is intermittent. The solar panels only work when, the sun is out, and wind turbines only work when the wind is out. That, and sometimes those create excess capacity, meaning there's more production than the grid can take. And so the basic idea there then is to have, battery storage that can take that excess power, hold it, for 12 hours, and then release that onto the grid when, the solar panels aren't producing power or the wind turbines aren't producing power. But I have not heard the circumstances, Councilmember Devlin, that you just articulated.
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
think we should encourage actually in projects battery storage because of the issues that the Secretary has cited, and the fact that sometimes they can't sell their power, sometimes they produce more of their power. But what I would hate to see is some sort of speculative way in which somebody might try to utilize low rates that might be available in a co-op and then to sell the power on the open market at the highest rates that they could get over a period. Also, I would hope that the local governments, and I would assume that they would consult with their local energy provider because some extra loads that are not anticipated can cause difficulties for some of those providers.
Thank you, Councillor Devlin. I do think it's a really interesting question. Yeah, for us all to contemplate.
Yeah, no, I hadn't contemplated that. Again, all the conversation has been about sort of the circumstances that I talked about, but never had heard that one. So that is interesting.
Thank you.
Next, House Bill 4090. So that was a proposal to eliminate FSEC jurisdiction on projects that are entirely proposed on federal lands. That did not move forward. So that one did not get through the Senate process. It got through the House, but not the Senate. And then finally, House Bill 1525. So this was, as I indicated before, a much larger bill. One component was Portland General Electric made an amendment to that that would allow for standby generators to be connected to the electrical grid and dispatched to the grid in certain circumstances. So if you recall, in order for a standby generator, as defined, it couldn't be connected to the grid. So this bill changed that standby generators can be connected to the grid, and in certain circumstances, they can provide power to the grid, and then it still retains that they're not FSEC jurisdictional, or they're exempt from FSEC jurisdiction. So essentially, as I stated before, this would create a functional peaker plant, a cumulative peaker plant across, an area. You have a lot of data centers have diesel backup generators, Intel, Oregon, Oregon, OHSU, all these sort of big companies, big industries, or big sort of facilities who need backup generator typically have those diesel generators on site. So, as I guess the way to kind of describe it as, there is more issues of renewable energy and more inconsistencies, or we get circumstances like the power, the snowstorm and the power outages. This creates more opportunities for those to kind of ramp up, as a peaker plant would, in those circumstances. Those circumstances are defined by the Code of Federal Regulations. So it's not they can't just use it all the time, but there are some limitations as to when they could use them.
Mr. Byer?
So because there are federal regulations defining the circumstances, there would be no FSEC rulemaking on this, or would we do a rulemaking to reflect the federal standards?
Yeah, that's a good question. We probably do need to do rulemaking to reflect that, but we wouldn't be in any hurry just because, statutorily it's changed. And, yeah, we probably need to clean up our rules to reflect, that consistency, but yeah, no hurry on that.
Okay, thank you. Because we just had this long list, right?
All right. Next are future council meeting dates. So the next council meeting is April 19th. That will be in Salem. We'll only need Friday. So I think that would be more of a typical, 8:30 to noonish. We are still trying to finalize the agenda, but at least the agenda items that we know right now would put us in that kind of range. And then again, thank you. We talked about this yesterday for your willingness to move the May meeting to the 30th and 31st. So not only did that have some potential benefits for yesterday's Wheat Ridge amendment, again, assuming no major issues come up, that would allow then a final decision for that project at that. If there are issues that come up, or we get a lot of information on the record, or the certificate holder needs more time to respond, there probably wouldn't be time to get to that, final decision at that meeting anyway. But we have other projects, and that extra 2 weeks gave us some good time for some other projects that are going to be on the May meeting as well. So right now we're looking at that being both the 30th and the 31st, and then having 1 or 2 public hearings the evening of the 30th. And we would be in Boardman.
And the April 19th meeting will be in Salem.
Yes. And then last on my list, so Vice Chair Condon, yesterday in the drive, you talked about the idea of within our staff reports, when we make references to rules or statutes, providing a link, in there. So it would be a hot link to be able to just click on that. So rather than sort of going out and sort of navigating to those rules or statutes. So I just wanted to sort of tee that up for you to kind of express that.
Thank you. And thank you for prompting it. Just in reviewing the material, and maybe I'm alone in this, but in reviewing them efficiently, it's difficult for me. And so I have been thinking about ways where the staff is just terrific at putting the page numbers and the sections of the DPO. And I was thinking it would be great if there'd be a link that while we're reading the material, we can go straight to the link to the space and read it at the same time. I thought I could use another computer and have 2 screens, but I think it would be easier, certainly for me, but I think everyone, if we could easily navigate from one document to the other, to support the information we're reading at the time, as opposed to remembering it and going to the other document. And quite frankly, for me, reading on the screen is difficult to keep the pages, and I don't know how to, I'm not as familiar with bookmarking as I should be, but I think it'd be helpful. So I see some head nodding, so if we could at least look into it. Councillor Imes.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. I agree. I think that it is difficult, especially if you only have one screen, right? If you have 2 screens, it's a little easier to navigate and move windows around and whatnot. So I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I was in Todd's office one day, and I think you had 2 screens, or you had a much bigger screen than I did. It's like, oh, I can see where that would be helpful. So, thank you. Anyone else? Counselor Devlin, any comment on that?
No, not at this time.
So we'll explore what sort of the options are. I mean, there's always like in a Word document, you can create sort of headings and then you can open up a navigation pane on the left side. That's not exactly what you're asking, but we can employ that, in staff reports. Maybe that would work. We already do that with draft proposed orders and maybe some sort of educational opportunity to show council members how that works to make sure that you're all aware of how that works. Again, that's not what you're asking, but I think there's some value in doing that as well. We will then explore where we can put links in. So like a Word document to Word document may not work. We can certainly put in links to statutes or rules that kind of go out to the website. So, but we will explore the idea and see what we can come up with.
Thank you. And I do think we had some experience with B2H having the navigating pane, which was helpful. It's just not used to using that as a new tool, I guess. And yeah, but it worked fine for that. So thank you.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Secretary Cornett. The agenda is the.
Counselor Condon, if you don't
Yes.
mind,
Oh,
I'd like to
yes.
give a quick update on the B2H request for Amendment 1 litigation.
Thank you.
I'll step back to the beginning, just to refresh all of our recollections. You'll recall last year you approved the request for Amendment 1 for B2H. At the same time, you denied a request for contested case that you had received. That request was from Ms. Irene Gilbert. Ms. Gilbert petitioned this year in Union County Circuit Court, challenging the denial of the request for a contested case. You'll recall that Idaho Power moved to transfer from the Circuit Court to Supreme Court. We joined that motion. The Circuit Court denied it, said, no, it's going to stay here. After that, and I think this is new since we met last month, things have been proceeding fairly quickly in the case. Idaho Power filed what's called a petition for writ to the Supreme Court. And that's saying, in spite of what the Circuit Court said, Supreme Court, we think you should take this up. We joined in that motion as well. The Supreme Court just this past week has issued a decision on that petition. And they said, we're not going to review the challenge to the denial of a contested case, but the council's decision on request for Amendment 1 is final. So the Amendment 1 stands as is because no one has challenged the decision to issue and approve the amendment. So the Amendment 1 stands. The Circuit Court will now consider the petition with regard to whether or not you should have granted a contested case.
Thank you. So is there timing? So from here, what happens from now? The Circuit Court, is there a timeline that they're on?
Yeah, and I can, as far as they don't have a deadline like the Supreme Court has, where the Supreme Court has a deadline to make a decision within 6 months of the petition. We'll try to get things to move. There'll be motions that will be filed probably pretty quickly, and I'll keep you updated on it.
Thank you very much, Councilor Rowe. Yes, Councilor Byer.
So what will the end result be if the circuit court says you had to grant that contested case? If the Supreme Court has said the amendment is final, life is there for the final approval, what impact will the circuit court's decision have on the process?
Yeah, that's a fair question. That is going to be addressed in briefs that will be filed shortly, and so we can share those briefs with you once they're filed.
It feels kind of wonky.
But it's understood. Thank you, Councilor Byer. And Councilor Devlin, any questions?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to the contested case. I think Mr. Clark is prepared.
Thank you, Vice Chair Condon. Thank you, members of the council. For the record, my name is Christopher Clark, Senior Siting Analyst with the department. Today, I'm filling in as a backup rules coordinator for Tom Jackman, who's out of the office. As the Vice Chair mentioned, today we will be holding a rulemaking hearing on the contested case rulemaking. Before I begin the hearing itself, and Nancy, if I could get this slide, please. Before I begin the hearing itself, I will briefly go over the projected timeline for this rulemaking, provide a background and overview of the proposed rules, and then we'll explain how the public hearing will be conducted and how members of the public can provide comments. There are opportunities to make written comments today at this hearing. There is also, opportunities to provide oral comments at this hearing, in addition to opportunities to make written comments until April 19th. Please keep in mind that the purpose of the hearing today is to take public comment, and no responses to comments or questions will be provided, although the council members are welcome to ask any clarifying questions of commenters that they wish. If you have questions about the proposed rules today, please raise them. If I can't answer them directly, Tom Jackman, the rules coordinator, will get back to you. So for the timeline, the council initiated this rulemaking back in July of last year. There was a rulemaking advisory committee meeting held in February, which led to the draft proposed rules being reviewed and the notice of proposed rulemaking being filed with the Secretary of State in February, on February 27th. The public notice was issued shortly thereafter. Today, of course, is the public hearing, and as I mentioned, in addition to the opportunity to provide oral comments today, you can provide written comments on this rulemaking until April 19th. At the May Council meeting, the staff expects to provide a presentation of proposed rulemaking, give recommendations on any public comments received, and present the proposed rule language to council for their final consideration and potential adoption of permanent rules. So please. Thank you. So the subject of this rulemaking is the contested case process and the contested case rules in OAR Chapter 345, Division 15. As you all know, a contested case is the process by which procedural and factual concerns related to the possible granting of a site certificate, which were properly raised during the public comment period on the draft proposed order, are raised again in front of a hearing officer appointed by the council. The primary goal of this rulemaking is to reorder and reorganize the administrative rules for the conduct of contested case hearings to better match the flow of the contested case process. The rulemaking would also update the rules to reflect the proposed adoption of the Office of Administrative Hearings model rules for contested cases. As you all may know, there are two sets of model rules for contested cases in OAR Chapter 137, one for cases not conducted by the Office of Administrative Hearings, one conducted for contested cases conducted by the Office of Administrative Hearings. And the council and staff have considered several reasons why the Office of Administrative Hearings model rules may be preferred. So the third reason is to improve the consistency of the rules, both internally with each other and to ensure that they properly match other Oregon laws and administrative rules. To improve the clarity of the rules by providing or enhancing definitions, and to improve the efficiency of the contested case process by providing additional guidance to prospective parties. Before I move on, if anybody has any questions about the content of the proposed rules themselves, I can do that. Otherwise, I'll explain how to participate in the process.
I see no questions.
Thank you. Okay, so today I will take public comments, first from people in the room, then from people on the webinar, and then by phone. If you are in the room and you want to provide a comment, please give me one of these salmon sheets with your name on it, and I will call you in the order the sheets have been received. If you are on the webinar, you will need to raise your hand within the WebEx environment. To do that, there should actually be a small hand icon on the bottom of your screen to the right of the unmute button, which you will also need to provide comments. So if you want to take a second and familiarize yourself with those buttons, please do so now. If you are on the phone, you can press *3 to raise your hand and then press *3 again to lower it when you're done. Great. Thanks so much. All right. Okay, so I'm going to begin the hearing in just a second. When you are coming up to testify, I will call your name, but again, please repeat your name again with spelling. If you represent an organization, please state the name of that organization. If you have written material to enter into the record, or if you're summarizing written material in your comments, please say so, and then try to summarize the written material as best you can. And then if you're able to, give me a copy of that material now or email it to someone at the department. Tom's email address was earlier in this presentation. If you have the slides, I can also give that to you after this presentation if you need it. Okay, slide, please. Oh, great. So I think we covered this. Great. So, and again, one more time, I think this is hopefully the third or fourth time. I don't know if we'll get to 7, but we'll try. In addition to the opportunity to provide oral comments at this hearing, anyone may submit written comments until 5 p.m. on April 19th, 2024, which is the close of the public comment period. Written comments may be submitted to fsec.rulemaking@energy.oregon.gov, or by one of the other ways shown on this slide, by the public comment portal, or by hand delivery to one of the staff members here, or by mail to the Oregon Department of Energy at 550 Capitol Street, Northeast, Salem, Oregon, 97301. Comments received by the department after 5 p.m. on April 19th will not be reviewed or considered by the council unless the council decides to extend the public comment period for everyone. Okay, with that, the time is now 9:13 a.m. and this hearing is now in session. As a reminder, the hearing is being recorded and a recording will be posted to the council's website in the next few days. The purpose of this hearing is to take public comment on the proposed amendment to OAR 345, Division 1, Rule 5, and other rules in OAR Chapter 345, Division 15, updating the Energy Facility Siting Council's contested case rules for greater clarity and consistency. The council invites comments on the proposed rules, including comments about whether options should be considered for achieving the rules goals while reducing the negative economic impact on business. Once again, either I or the council will respond to questions or comments during this hearing. However, council members may ask clarifying questions of commenters if they wish. After the close of the public comment period at 5 p.m. on April 19th, 2024, the council will review all issues raised in public comments before making their final decision. I'll begin taking the in-person comments now. The first commenter that we have signed up is Ms. Irene Gilbert.
I just provided him my basically, Irene Gilbert.
Turn on the mic first, please. There you go.
Irene Gilbert, 2310 Adams Avenue, LeGrand, Oregon. And I just handed a copy of the written material that I'm going to be sort of going over briefly today. That is only the first installment, if you will. I only went through page 9 of the proposed rules in that document, so there will be additional comments coming in. And first thing I wanted to suggest is when FSAC is being scheduled for a hearing that's going to be, or a meeting that's going to be 4 or 5 hours total, it would be really nice if it all happened on one day. Had I realized the extent of the Wheat Ridge information, I would have been driving back and forth to La Grande 2 different times because I would have appeared for the hearing last night as well as today. And it doesn't seem to meet the standard of limiting pollution to have people driving in 2 different days to be present for a face-to-face, if that's their goal. So just a consideration and a suggestion, I would have been polluting twice as much. Another thing is I wanted to provide a sort of clarification on one thing that Patrick Rose said, and that is in the issue that's went before the Supreme Court, I made a very clear distinction between approval of a site certificate and to get
So,
conditions. And
Madam Vice Chair, so we need to keep this limited to the contested
Okay.
case rulemaking.
okay,
So
I
there will be a public comment timeframe later on where you can address things outside of
okay,
this particular rulemaking.
yeah, it was a little in.
I would say also only if it's a procedural matter. You can't talk about anything substantive. My update was purely procedural.
Right.
Anything to the merits cannot be discussed at
Right.
this time. That
It's
goes to the
just-
court.
It's just a definition. Okay. One of my concerns here is when FSAC adopts the rules, the administrative hearings section rules, it was indicated that the first set of rules that goes 001 through 0094 was for cases where there was not a hearings officer from the administrative hearings decision. That's not really correct because that first section of rules talks about in the model rules, the rights of parties to contested cases. So it is focused on specific information about the people who are applying for a contested case. The second set of rules relates to the role of the hearings officer in handling contested cases. So when you take just the second section and remove all the information that gives the details about the rights of the parties, that's not appropriate. So I'd like to have you go back and take a look. There's a whole lot of information about what rights the parties have, and I'm making comments on those, some of those in my notices, but I think that will be a real problem. The other thing is with the issue of parties or whether parties are limited or full parties to a contested case, there was reference to the court decision that came about as a result of the Stop V2H appeal for the original site certificate. And based on that, the interpretation that's being presented is that council has a right to limit everybody to making them simply limited parties. That is not what that order said. What the order said is, in the language, it said that the hearings officer had looked at all of the issues that are required to limit somebody, and they had determined that it was legitimate in this instance to limit parties to limited party status. They did not say that council had the authority to just make a blanket statement and say everybody is going to be a limited party. They specifically went through all of the information in 137.003.0005, which gives that criteria that must be considered. So to jump over that hoop by not including the information about party rights can be a real, that's one area where it's a real problem. There has to be some criteria that is met in order to make someone a limited party. Okay, let's see. Another thing is, in these new rules, it makes it appear that there are some groups that are not going to be allowed to have lay representation. That would be, and it appears that it would include groups like Stop B2H, which I'm co-chair of. There is a rule, actually it's a statute, Oregon Revised Statute 183.457 says, no rule adopted by a state agency shall have the effect of precluding lay representation. And then it says the agencies before which an authorized representative may appear, and it lists the State Department of Energy. So you can't include in this anything that would force folks like nonprofits to have, they can have a lay person represent them. And the rules do not support that, as I understood. I will tell you, I did a lot of looking back to the statutes, and I base that on the fact that when I was working for Workers' Comp as their medical issues coordinator, my job was to review legislation, the bills as they went through, and analyze what the effects were on medical providers, insurers, injured workers, and provide that information to the director. So I was part of their executive staff. That is the approach that I took. I read the rules. What's the plain language of this rule? What are the statutes that are related to it? What are the other rules that are related to it? And is it consistent with the statute? And so I'm basing my comment on that analysis. And so another area that there are problems is in the discovery rules. And if you review the Oregon revised rules for civil actions, it gives you the scope of discovery. And unless it's otherwise limited by court order, it says, for all forms of discovery, parties may inquire regarding any matter not privileged that is relevant to a claim or reference of any party, including the existence, description, nature, custody, condition, goes on and on here. At any rate, it's very broad. Discovery is very broad. And these rules say that, in fact, in one place it says, for any reason, the hearings officer can limit discovery. And I know there were a lot of problems with that during the during the initial site certificate evaluation. There was a lot of limiting of requests for discovery and denials of requests for discovery. And in the rules, it says that if the administrative judge is limiting or changing anything with discovery, they're required to issue an order. Once they issue an order, currently, people can appeal to the county courts based on previous decisions of the courts and also the one that's now being heard. So anyway, what the rule says is there must be an explanation of how the discovery is likely to produce information that is generally relevant and necessary to the case. And that was evaluated by the judge in a very, very narrow way, that it had to be very, very specific. And it basically, according to this rule, the burden of proof is more on the administrative law judge to say, why is that person justified in limiting discovery, and why is it not going to perhaps provide information that's relevant to the issue that's being argued. Let's see. Another thing, because of the fact that they're referencing the rules for the hearings officer and not including the rules that apply to the petitioners, one of the things that the rules that they're referencing say is that if someone's dissatisfied with the decision on discovery, they're to ask the chief administrative law judge. There's to go back to the chief administrative law judge to ask for a review of the decision. I don't think that that's what where FSAC wants people to go when they don't like the decision in the order of, on discovery. I doubt that that's where the head of the Department of Justice wants you to go in terms of involving them in deciding whether or not the decision of the administrative law judge to limit discovery was appropriate. So that might be something you want to consider when you're looking through this. Says the chief administrative law judge, so is the one who makes the decision. Okay, when I started putting this together, I started out with some general concerns that have to do sort of broadly with what the rules say. And then I went to the rules that are being proposed, went through them page by page. I've only gotten through page 8 so far, but I will have continued through the rest of them before I'm done here. And some of the general concerns is that, number one, the notice did not accurately reflect the impact of the changes. You know, you heard the comments about, well, they're general, changing the order, and you know, really it isn't a significant change. There are some very, very major changes in these rules based on applying the rules for administrative law judges and removing the rules that have to do with petitioners. So unless you leave both of those in there, this document has substantial changes, which should be provided in the notice to the public that there are those kinds of changes. And I mentioned a couple of them to you. I know that when the original notice went out, it didn't include the red line copy. I'm assuming that that is now being sent out because the public didn't get a copy of the red line changes in the rules when the notice was sent out. And that is a requirement. I'm sure you all know, if you're going to make changes in the rules, that the public gets a copy of the red line version. One of the concerns that I've had, and actually the reason that there's an appeal going on with Amendment 1 is that when FSAC refuses the public an opportunity to have a contested case, there is no opportunity for the petitioner to develop a full file of their arguments to submit to the Oregon Supreme Court. Now, the Oregon Supreme Court rules say that what they review is they review the case file, the contested case file, when they're making a decision on contested cases. So if you're not allowing a contested case, that's why it's going to the county currently as a non-contested case, because the county then is the vehicle whereby the public is able to develop a file that can be appealed to the Oregon, to the Supreme Court. So that is a big deal for petitioners around whether or not, when they're denied an opportunity for a contested case, it is appropriate for it to go to the Supreme Court. And I'm saying, no, it isn't. The Department of Energy's recommendations to you folks on these rules, I believe, take discretion to a point that it exceeds the authority in the statutes. The Oregon statutes, if you look at 469-501, I believe it is, that says that FSAC has the right to develop rules. It states specifically what kind of rules you're allowed to establish. And it talks about that you establish the rules for the application, the decisions. I don't know, I wrote it in my document. Please read my documents, because if you're relying on someone else's comments about what I have to say, this is 14 pages. Please read my justification. Don't just rely on someone else's one-liner about what my arguments are. But at any rate, if you read what the authority that FSAC has for developing rules, it does not include changing the contested case process. There's nothing in there that would relate to having the ability to deny people rights that are included in statutes and in the I don't know, just like I read to you, the rules of civil procedure are there, and you can't be circumventing them. And these rules circumvent the rights that are included as law. Let me see here. So I mentioned that the decision on FSAC involved reiterating that list of requirements. So there were requirements, there were standards for limiting a petitioner to limited party status. In OAR 345-15-04154G, it says that the hearings officer can limit the issues which are raised with sufficient specificity in the public hearing for, quote, any purpose the hearings officer finds necessary. I would say that statement is clearly and exceeds the power of the agency, according to the statutes. And also, there's a requirement that that the administrative law judge issue an order on these decisions. Now that order would mean that there's an opportunity for people to appeal their decision on how they're limiting party status and how they're limiting issues. It's my understanding right now, according to the existing law, that those bills would go to the circuit courts. I also made a recommendation on 01-4153, page 6. And this has to do with defining sufficient specificity. That information is included in the paragraph. And as you read the paragraph, my initial reaction was, this is not okay. It's not clear. It doesn't help. When I looked at it again, if instead of having a paragraph, the rules would be set up where it says to have raised an issue with sufficient specificity, the person must, and do it like a numerical thing. Number one, identify the recommended factors or conditions of approval which they object to. That'd be the first thing. Number two, identify the council standard or applicable state and local law. That's a requirement number two. And number three is present facts or statements supporting the objection on the record of the public hearing. So if it were presented that way, that there are three things that you have to do, and those three things are included in the paragraph, but the way it's worded, they all kind of blend together, and it's not clear that there are three different requirements and what they are. So I'm recommending that it be broken down and numbered 1, 2, 3. Also, the description of the issue statement says that the statement itself must identify the issue the person wishes to raise. It is not permissible to identify limited party is arguing based on previously acceptable, what they previously stated. That is, I mean, I read it and kind of shook my head about what it really meant. And I would suggest that that be reworded to say, the issue statement is to be worded the way the person wants their issue to be stated for the contested case. Period. It gets rid of all that extra verbiage there that tends to just confuse the issue. So, and maybe there's a better way to state it, but but there ought to be a one-liner that says, say what your issue is that you're wanting to have a contested case on concisely. This is what I want to be heard. Uh, the this whole thing about what the criteria are being placed on people who are identified as limited parties is incredibly structured, and it denies the limited parties access to a whole lot of different things that they ought to be able to respond to. For example, according to this, a limited party, as I read it, is not going to be able to reference other site certificate contested cases that are related to their issue. And oftentimes, the scope of a contested case issue is going to overlap with the scope of another contested case issue. So the information, the documents, the exhibits that are relevant to one contested case issue are very likely relevant to another contested case issue. So I think you need to be clear that, and the other thing is people who are being interviewed or doing interrogatories. Oftentimes, the stuff from the information that's being provided is relevant to more than one contested case issue. And so I would encourage you to be very careful about saying that people who are limited can only stay in this very narrow track, because that is not, that's not consistent with providing a fair and unbiased evaluation of the issue. If you're saying, well, this person asked for somebody to comment on the state rules on invasive plants. Well, there may be, very likely would be, more than one issue statement that relates to invasive plants. It could be something where someone's arguing about habitat impacts. It could be something where they're arguing about water impacts. And it all goes back to the fact that invasive plants are going to affect those other issues. So I'm not at this point making a recommendation about how you do that. I'm just saying that saying the way this is worded right now, it's really precluding discovery, if you will, on things that are relevant to other, to multiple issues. I would just take out the statement in 345 15 415 parent 7, page 7, which says, which includes proposed site certificate conditions. It says that because according to later in the rules, it says that everybody, even limited parties, have the right to respond to site certificate conditions. But yet here it says, it complicates it because it includes that you don't have the right as a limited party to comment on site certificate conditions, but then it refers you to the later part of the rule that says any party can respond to site certificate conditions. So I find that very confusing. Ms.
Goulart, I just will say there are a few other people waiting to provide
Okay.
comments, so please summarize.
Okay, I will.
as best as you can.
I had problems with the definition of indigent. Having worked in social services for many years, there are a lot of agencies that have definitions of indigent, and none of them that I'm aware of are as restrictive as the 100% of the federal standard. Even the federal groups say that 125% of the federal standard is actually considered indigent. And there are there's a bunch of court cases that defines indigent, and actually they provide for legal representation for people that are indigent. So I think it would probably be wise to be more flexible about who is indigent under these rules. Anyway, you'll get a lot more comments. I made many comments at the RAC. I didn't provide those right now because I'm kind of going through and approaching these rules in a different way. I will go back and try to remove the things that were changed. And I thank you that there were 2 or 3 things that I recommended that did get changed. So obviously you read my comments, and I hope that council does the same thing. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilbert. And before you go, do any members of the council have any questions or clarifications?
This is Councilmember Byer. Just a quick comment, and thank you for reminding us that for folks in the room who aren't fully aware of our rulemaking process, the department does work with a rules advisory committee that includes people from the energy industry, representatives from the public. So these rules just don't get hatched. They have input from the public, and I believe there were 2 or 3 rules advisory committee meetings. So the department does rely heavily on input from outside, and that happens with every rulemaking. So just so people who aren't familiar with the process understand that this is bigger than just the department. So thank you. And thank you to Irene for serving on multiple RACs, and many other members have as well, and we value their input.
Thank you, Counselor Byer. Counselor Grail.
Good morning. Yes, ma'am. I just want to say that we all, I shouldn't say we all, but numerous times we as council have talked about the specific specificity and your comments about numbers. I think anytime that we can make things orderly, bullet, it's good. So apparently you're listening to us as well.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Are we done?
Counselor Devlin. Counselor Devlin.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. I do have a question. This is Counselor Condon. When you submit your remarks in written form, is it really clear when you refer back to a rule in your comments? Is that really made really clear in your comments? It would make it much easier to review. And counselors do read the material, but sometimes if the references aren't there, it makes it much more difficult.
And I have been, based on the way I've approached these rules, you will see many references to related rules, statutes, rules of civil procedure. Yeah, I have made every effort to do that so that you'll know where I'm coming from on this.
Okay, thank you. And you do know that we extended the deadline, so you have some time. It's not going to be today that
Oh, yes, I
You know,
didn't know that, or I would have
yes.
done something entirely different today.
Thank you for being here and your comments.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Just to clarify, Ms. Gilbert did, as she mentioned, provide a written comment of the rules. Those will be made available to the council in your packet before you consider permanent rules. There were also some, I think, questions or comments directed towards procedural issues that I think Tom would be best to address. So I'll make sure I point those out for him to respond to at a future council meeting. Great. So next we have Mr. John Luciani, and sorry about the pronunciation. Before you give your testimony, please just state your name with spelling and if you represent an organization, the name of the organization.
Yes, John Luciani, JohnLuciani. I'm at 27633 Butter Creek Road, Echo, Oregon 97826. This is not my first time meeting with you. I don't know how many times over the years I've sat here. the contested case, I understand the reason I'm here is you're changing, possibly changing rules or upgrading rules. Is that correct?
That is
And I have some, Mrs. Condon, I asked her this morning, every time I sit here, I have questions and we cannot ask questions. So we never get any answers. So I have a few questions. Those are the beginning of my questions are, I understand, first off, last night was a wonderful meeting. I love windmills. I have a, I'm under, I like Nextera and they have leased my place and I can't wait for windmills. On the other hand, as a Christian man, I like to keep things very nice, but the old Johnny comes out once in a while. And I got to say, I hate Idaho Power. It's been a 20-year struggle with Idaho Power Corporation.
Mr. Wuchani,
in my place.
please do keep this to the contested case rules.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
So I understand that they shouldn't Idaho Power stayed in the energy corridor by law?
Yeah, so I'm going to reiterate that this is unrelated to the contested case rulemaking.
I
So,
understand.
so please refrain from bringing up the Idaho Power or the Boardman Hemingway project, and please keep your comments related to the proposed rules.
The reason I bring it up is I was kicked out early of the contested case. I was one of the first ones to go. So I am here today to state that a normal person, I guess you could say I was a dirt farmer. We have no chance in this process. None whatsoever. Did you make the rules? I guess you did. I have no chance whatsoever, a normal person. So I got kicked out early. I have probably more than anybody else reasoning to be there and to state my case. And I was kicked out early. I have no chance. So when you change your rules, I think that everybody that was kicked out should be allowed to come back and start over in this process. And if not, then what good is it? So I would ask that we start over again with all the contested case hearings on the B2H and give us normal people a chance to state what we want to state and to be heard and not kicked out. I understand, well, okay, I can't say anymore because I have a lot to say about different things, but that's my statement. I would wish that you would consider that, because how many people have been kicked out? I think there were 50 started, down to 1 or 2 left. It's a stacked deck. If I was a poker player and I sat around a table and one guy won all the hands, eventually I'd have to say that something isn't right here. And you guys have rubber stamped, and guys and gals, you've rubber stamped everything from the beginning. So please reconsider contested cases and let us redo them with new rulemaking and new rules. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you go, are there any questions or clarifications from the council? All right. Thank you so much for your comments, Mr. Lucia.
Thank you.
Right. Is there anyone else in the room Not seeing any. I do see that Ms. Ann Marsh has her hand raised and Fuji Kreider, so I will take Ms. Marsh first. You can unmute her. And you should be unmuted, or you should be unmuted now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I'm Ann March. I'm at 206 Main Avenue in LeGrand. And I was granted limited party status in the B2H contested case, along with my husband. So before I start, it would help me to know if council members have a copy of the rules, the draft of the rules in front of them now, or should I be referencing specific places? Or do you have a copy in front of you is what I need to know, I guess.
Ms. Marsh, I will say some members are nodding their heads in the affirmative. I would suggest that you be as specific with your comments though as you can.
Okay. So in the process that I went through, my husband and I went through, we learned a lot. It was frustrating because we're not lawyers. Honestly, I echo what was just said. If the goal of the process was to intimidate citizens, it definitely achieved that. So anything you can do to make it smoother, clearer, more equitable for people is a good thing. And that's why I'm here today. So here are my comments. There's a section on page 5, number 1. The section called filing and service. It ends in 0410. This section deals with how we can file documents. I just want to say emailing documents is a problem. We had a large mailing list. Emails bounced back. There were spam blockers. Our email box was clogged. We received many emails that weren't related to our case, making it harder to wade through. We often wondered if our emails made it to the right people. My suggestion is we need a different system, some kind of docket system that we can file and easily access in an organized way. That would be great. I just want to add finding information within the documents within the application and the Odo website was a nightmare because there were thousands and thousands of pages. I also want to add the administrative law judge denied a request I put in to change the deadline for filing from 5 p.m. on Fridays to I wanted to do it Sundays. It was contested by Idaho Power lawyers, maybe, I don't know who else, saying no, they want to stick to the 5 p.m. deadline. Well, that worked for people working on this professionally, but for those of us who had other jobs, I'm a teacher. 5 p.m. Friday was a really tough deadline for me to make. We did it. We made it work. There, in my mind, no reason why we couldn't do a Sunday evening deadline. Everyone who wanted to get it done on Friday sure could, but the rest of us needed a little more time sometimes. So then in the section ending in 0415, the request for party status, that's on page 6. This is a big issue for us and many others that we know. The department, and then later the ALJ, using their exact wording, wrote our issue statement after we submitted a letter. Now, our letter was a little more broad than our issue statement. We did not know at the time how important that issue statement that we were given was, and that we could even object to what it was. We didn't even know that at the time. This impacted us greatly because our letter, it mentioned concerns about fish habitat disruption. It was reduced to one single issue, fish passage. Consequently, we were very limited regarding what we could actually talk about and argue. And by the time we realized it, it was too late to change anything. Now, this was very convenient for the department and for the applicant. the department and the ALJ should not be writing the issue statement unless the party wants that to happen. I think it could be a collaborative process instead of those entities writing it and handing it out, because you have people who don't know that an issue statement is so important at that time. The section needs clearer language about notifying parties regarding their ability to object to an issue statement. So, you know, like page 7B does not indicate how important the statement is. And I think it really needs to be hammered that it is extremely important to have an issue statement that is correct for you and your issue. We just did not realize that it was so small, that it had been reduced so much. Page 9, it was the section ending in 0430, pre-hearing conference and pre-hearing order. Kind of indicates to me that we as parties do not have necessarily, the ALJ may have a hearing, but we don't necessarily have the right to clarify our issues for the ALJ. I know we had the right to hand in those issues in writing, but at a hearing, we didn't, I mean, we weren't given the ability that I recall to clarify our issues before the issue statement was made. Page 9, number 4. There is therefore a huge problem if decisions are final and parties didn't know they could object to the language that the department and the ALJ, which were one and the same in our case, chose. And that section says that, you know, basically the decisions, the order is final. So again, we didn't know that by being granted limited party status, we would be able to only discuss that one issue and not the broader issue of habitat that we raised in our original letter. Just felt as a citizen that since it was very convenient in the end for the applicant and the department, it felt like the ALJ was there to do their bidding and not ours. It made the whole process seem unfair. So I can't say it enough. There must be a way to let people know they can appeal that issue statement before it's too late. Okay, so I have a couple more things, and then I'll be done. Page 14, the section ending in 0475, it actually starts on page 13. It's the hearing officer's proposed contested case order. The final order may adopt, modify, or reject the hearing officer's proposed order and also the department's proposed order. And I'm assuming that's where the FSEC committee comes in. And we were very hopeful that the FSEC committee would understand our cases and would consider them and would spend time on them. And it didn't come across that way. So it's really a nice thing to say that in that section, but it's our belief that is not going to happen with the current system of the department being paid by and working for the applicant. And so FSEC is then at that end of it, hearing, for example, had a wonderful 2-day hearing in LeGrand. We appreciated you coming out. You were given an 8-inch binder to read if you were one of the unfortunate people who were there. 8-inch binder, I've never seen one so big. But because it was so much information, you had to rely heavily and maybe exclusively on advice from the department's lawyer and your own. And I'm understanding you probably have other jobs, you're volunteers, maybe. This committee, in the end, because of that, because coming to listen to us, having us be able to speak, it just appeared to be a sham. And for your own self-preservation and sanity, you simply did what the department said you should do, or your own counsel. So we spent 3 years on this case. This committee could never, without a ton of time and legal knowledge, do your jobs properly. At that same meeting, we were introduced. Our issue was introduced by Jesse Radcliffe. He misstated something regarding ODF and W studies that were being completed, which weren't. During our 3-minute turn, we pointed out the error. And then when Oregon Department of Energy, Patrick Rowe came back, kind of gave the inaccurate information related to Jesse Radcliffe's statement, we were given 3 minutes each. We were never allowed a rebuttal time. So we could never address that inaccurate information. So that to the FSAC committee. So that process of not having a chance after, I mean, we went first, they went second, and then we can't come back. And I would like to see something in the process where we have a chance to point out anything else that was said that possibly was erroneous, at least from our point of view. So that would be something I would say somehow we have to get in there to make this process at least appear to be more equitable. During those hearings, FSAC committee members only asked limited parties a handful of questions. I only saw 2 questions being asked, and I believe it was last name Condon and Byers who asked those questions, and we appreciated that. The committee asked Oregon Department of Energy and the applicant plenty of questions, and it felt like we were there so that they could check a box, rubber stamp what they needed to do that day, possible task. And then a straw vote was taken right then. That process seems way too fast if clearly the education piece hasn't happened yet. So that, just from a PR standpoint, does not make you guys look good. So that's enough about that. A couple of easy things. Well, one last thing, an easy thing that would help the process. Kellen Tardeweather recently made a video and sent it out regarding Amendment 2 that's coming up. That was a very helpful thing for people to watch and learn from. And that would be something that could potentially help this entire process, is if, because she did a really nice job with it. Somebody could do that for people, that would be super helpful. It's a quagmire for us. In my opinion, we're the most important people that you need to reach and educate about this process. And there are a lot of people out there that would benefit from that. So I think that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. March. Are there any questions or clarifications from the council?
Can you hear me? There. Are we good? Yeah. Ms. March, I do have a question related to the issue statement. In your issue statement, that I think you intended to be broader. Did you mention fish passage? Which it sounds like was narrowed down. Your issue statement was narrowed down to just passage, and I'm just curious if you had referred to that.
Oh, I believe we had, and we also referred to several other issues, and that's the one we were given.
Yeah, and it's just the issue statement itself. Like, did you say habitat and then go into passage?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe we did, and I'd have to go look at it. It was a 2-page letter. Again, that's early in the process. We don't always know. We didn't know at that time, but we just stated in plain language what our concerns were. And we did not understand that fish passage did not mean anything but structures being built in the streams or not being built in the streams. And we really believed it was a broader statement. But we did mention habitat in our initial petition, and then didn't have the knowledge to know that we were being handed something so small. And of course, by the time we did realize that, it was way, way too late, way late in the process.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Counselor Byer.
I just want to thank you for your comments and also the mention of Kellen's video. I think that helps both the council and the department understand what is useful in helping people navigate the process. So thanks for that feedback.
You're welcome.
All right, hearing no other questions or clarifications from the council, thank you so much for your comments, Ms. March. I see that Fuji Kreider also has her hand raised. Ms. Kreider, if you'd like to provide your comments, please go ahead.
This is Jim Kreider on Fuji Kreider's computer. So,
Thank you for stating your name, Jim.
right. Well, my name is Jim Kreider, and I'm at 60366 Marvin Road, LeGrand, Oregon. And I am a member of this Rules Advisory Committee. And that is just what this RAC was, advisory. Tom Jackman, the ODOE Rules Coordinator, listened and heard what we said. However, those discussions are not properly reflected in the red line. The RAC has carefully crafted guardrails with the purpose of speeding up the process for developers so they could have more certainty. It has not been about striking a balance, but it's about changing the balance in support of the developers and not the people of the state, in my opinion. Let me remind everyone of the guardrails for this RAC per Tom Jackman's January 3rd, 2024 memo to the RAC members. The proposed changes of the council's contested case rules can be divided into roughly 5 categories. 1, reorder and reorganize the rules to better match the flow of the contested case process. 2, update the rules to reflect a proposed adoption of the Office of Administrator Hearings model rules for contested cases. 3, improve the consistency of the rules, both internally and to ensure they properly match Oregon laws and other administrative rules. 4, improve the clarity of the rules by providing or enhancing definitions where appropriate. And 5, improve the efficiency of the contested case process by providing additional guidance to all parties and prospective parties who are affected by these rules. The first one, reorder and organize the rules to better match the flow of the contested case process, is completed. I spent a good deal of time reordering the rule sections to match the workflow based on my practical experience with these rules and the lack of logic in their organization at the time. My reorganization was never discussed by the RAC, ODOE staff, or FSAC, and I wrote you a letter saying so. Staff did what they were told to do by attorneys to limit, also known as streamline the process for developers. If anyone had taken the time to look at my suggestions, there would have been some questions, because at least one of them had to make sense. The second, update the rules to reflect a proposed adoption of the Office of Administrative Hearings model rules for contested cases, is being discussed in this specific rulemaking. A question you will see over and over in my red line comments is, why does FSAC also need to keep their set of rules in addition to the Office of Administrative Hearings model rules? Staff's memo states the council is not bound by OHA rules through this adoption, as laid out in OAR 345-015-041, Section 3. In any conflict between the Office of Administrative Hearing Rules and council rules, the council shall apply its own rules. When, how, why, and who will make the decision to change from the Office of Administrative Hearings model rules for contested cases to ODOE's rules? How can the rules change midstream in a contested case? This and other questions were never discussed, much less answered. Staff again did what the attorneys told them to do. The third, improve the consistency of the rules both internally and to ensure they properly match Oregon laws and other administrative rules. Several sections of the rules and meanings used in the red line were incorrect. Detailed clarifications were given by me in writing, but I still don't know what, if any, were incorporated into this rule set. I'll let you know these in my written comments. Fourth, improve the clarity of the rules by providing or enhancing definitions where appropriate. Many examples were given for rule clarification. You just heard a few. These examples are from a pro se's point of view, who were run through the rules interpretation gamut in the B2H contested case. The discretion given to ODOE and DOJ staff working as one come down on the side of the developer and speed. Justice and fairness do not seem to factor into the decision-making. Fifth, improve the efficiency of the contested case process by providing additional guidance to all parties and prospective parties who are affected by the rules. Well, until a case study is done on several of these contested cases, this goal will not be achieved. If one does not look at what was done right and what has been done wrong, how can one improve? As I sit on this rack, this is about helping developers site facilities more rapidly. It is not about learning and listening to the public about better right siting. How is FSAC going to integrate the right siting work of the Department of Land and Conservation and Development in their current rack on finding opportunities for reducing conflict in siting photovoltaic solar power generating facilities? In the legislature's infinite wisdom, this was to be a statewide assessment, but in order to get enough votes from the West Side legislators, the West Side was dropped for right siting, and only Central and Eastern Oregon were targeted for this privilege. How are FSAC rules going to address their selection of only solar sites in Central and Eastern Oregon? Developers don't want the public throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks. And the public doesn't want to throw spaghetti on the wall either. So we need intervener funding for proper public representation. The developer pays millions of dollars to the ODOE for staff time. So why not for the public too? It will speed up the process. If not, spaghetti will be what we eat at all contested cases. This concludes my verbal comments, and I will follow up with more detailed ones.
Thank you, Mr. Kreider. Are there any questions or clarifications from the council? Seeing none, thank you again for your comments. I do not see any other hands raised at this time, but one last call, if you would like to provide comments, please click the raise your hand button at the bottom of the screen. Okay, and I did see that Mr. Kreider's hand went down and then up. Can you? Okay. Okay, with that then, and there's no callers on the phone. So with that, I will conclude this hearing. The time is now 10:14. The opportunity for oral Oh, okay. I will reverse that statement and yeah, please unmute Mr. Kreider.
We were not, hello, this is Fuji Kreider. I am sorry, we were not clear that there was going to be two of us testifying in this one hand raising. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
Please feel free to
Yes.
provide your comments.
Fuji Kreider, FUJIKREIDER, 60366 Marvin Road, LeGrand, Oregon. I don't have a lot more to say. I wanted to speak at the end just to see what kind of comments you had heard. We will be submitting much detailed comments to you in writing, as you know, and you've heard, because a lot of this is very complicated and detailed, and it's hard in a verbal context to be spewing out OARs and this and that. So I'll leave that for the written. It will be detailed, and I hope you get it in enough time to review before you actually take action on it. I just want to make a few comments to help with some of the, fill in some of the gaps too of some experiences here. As you know, most of us, well, everyone who has spoke today were involved in the Boardman to Hemingway transmission line project contested case, and it was a big case. It was probably the biggest case you've ever had. And it also, I mean, so we're talking over 3 years. Heart attacks, panic attacks, you name it, everything in between. People survived and we made it. It was difficult. People learned a lot from it, and we have a lot to share. And I am hoping that the council, with the interest of protecting the public interest, in addition to securing energy supplies and whatnot, but doing the balance of this, you have to consider all parts. And here you have a group of people who actually lived through this process for over 2 years with all the little components. We have a lot to share. And I hope that you read and listen to what the things that people say. A couple of things, I mean, you know, we started out with, I think it was over 52 petitioners for the new people who are in FSAC and don't realize this, over 77 issues after the first round or so, and dealing with the model rules and getting standing and who got standing and who didn't. We were down to about 37 petitioners and 71 issues. After summary determination, that got cut in half, not one summary determination, which was another issue in and of itself. In the end, 19 petitioners, 19 people and 30 issues were drugged through this process. So we have a lot of experience. So please listen to us. That's my main request. As Ann March mentioned, I'm just going to reinforce a docketed system or some kind of docketed system has to be provided. This was total crazy chaos. I mean, literally, internet service providers were blocking people. They cut people off because they thought we were spamming, because the only way to do the filing and the service filings of these huge documents were to to reply all to everyone, because everyone had to be notified, of course, but there's got to be a better system than email. Now, we know this because we also work in the PUC arena. We were told you do not have a docketed system like the PUC, that the DOJ does not have one. Well, if there's anything, and it's not part of this rulemaking, but if there's anything I can really reinforce that would be very helpful for the public, is to either invest in one yourself or to put in the contract with the Office of Administrative Hearings that they must have a docketed system. It's just crazy making otherwise. We're talking about a basic application that started at 17,000 pages, delivered to county planning officers with like a person or a person and a half county planner that we had in our case. I mean, these are huge things. We can't just be dealing with paper and email. So we need another better way. I'm sorry, I'm probably beating a dead horse on that one. To just clarify a little further, maybe what Ann March was also talking about with the fish passage habitat and Cindy Condon's, Chair Condon's question. Fish passage was mentioned and all that, but because the issue statement was so narrow, their real issue about the Oregon Department of Transportation multi-year, multi-million-dollar project to open fish passage for steelhead on the upper Ladd Creek that opened up that habitat to potentially a Category 1 habitat was not even in the case. because the issue statement brought them down to a narrow fish passage, things being constructed in the water at the site. That whole thing, they did their best. They argued their best. They went through the whole contested case, but it really was limited. It was not really what they initially were commenting on in their DPO. So the whole fish habitat was missing in the case. So that's just some clarification there. But like I said, the main thing, we will be coming in writing. We will put examples where we can to help you out. If you have questions, please ask us. Why are you recommending this and not that? There's a reason. Every single one of our recommendations that come to you will have clear examples, and more if you'd like, as to why we recommend that. I'll just give you one and I'll stop because your hearing is going on too long, but it's right in the very beginning in the model rules, and it basically references a subsection that relates to ex parte communication. Okay. And that, it's okay, it makes sense. And you got your OAR 137-003, and it crosses out 0055 and puts 06601 in place of it. Well, that basically, it's the uniform model rules, and you're trying to make it simple so that you're only citing one sort of reference, it appears. But the problem is that is limited because there are actually 3 rules within the DOJ's model rules that address ex parte. They're spread out. Unfortunately, their rules are as chaotic as others. But all 3 provisions deal with ex parte, not just the one. So 0055 applies during the pendency of the proceeding. 0625 addresses when there's ex parte communications with the ALJ. And then 0660 is when ex parte communications are to the agency during the contested case review. So they all should stay. So our recommendation is going to be to tell you to leave all 3 of those in there and don't just pick one, because as we know, ex parte can happen any place during the proceeding of a case. And in our case, it did happen. And it was weird because it didn't even happen in the case. It happened during rulemaking, like what we're doing today, a different rulemaking process. And the developer interjected in the rulemaking. To her credit, the ALJ in our case noticed that and realized it was ex parte to you guys. She put that forward and allowed the petitioners to comment. 7 petitioners did comment. I don't know if you ever saw that or that went into a black hole or not, because it was part of the contested case, which was not in your purview. It's happening separate and on the side. So all this is happening. The bottom line is ex parte can happen anywhere, so we need all of those subsections to stay in there. That will be an example of how I will proceed with the way we give you feedback on these rules. And so I think that's probably it for right now. I know you've been going on a long time. And so thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'm going to thank you in advance for reading thoroughly the comments that you hear on this case and the rules for the contested case rulemaking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kreider. Are there any questions or requests for clarification from the council? Okay, hearing none. Thank you again, Ms. Kreider.
You're welcome.
With that, I am not seeing any new raised hands. And March's hand is still raised. Anne, would you mind putting your hand down? Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, with that, I am not seeing any hands raised, and I will conclude this hearing. The time is now 10:24, and the opportunity for oral comments is over. As I mentioned earlier, any person may still provide written comments until 5 p.m. on April 19th, which is the close of the public comment period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Thank you very much to all of the people who testified today or provided testimony today. And don't forget the extended period for you to comment either through the portal or in writing. So with that, we are running a little bit behind schedule. We're scheduled for a 15-minute break. I know people might have to check out or whatever, so I think we'll keep it at 15 minutes. And so with the time's now 10:25, so 10:40, we'll be back. Thank you. So welcome back. It's now 10:40, and I'd like to call the meeting back from recess and continue on with the next agenda item, which is the Trojan Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation Security Plan decision with Christopher Clark, Senior Siting Analyst.
Thank you, Vice Chair Condon. Once again, for the record, my name is Christopher Clark. I'm a Senior Siting Analyst with the department. So this is a continuation from an agenda item from the last meeting. As you all remember, I believe, the Portland General Electric submitted revision 9 to their security plan for the Trojan Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation, or ISFSI, last fall, and the council went through the process of appointing Mark Reese to go and conduct an inspection of that facility. And if you could advance the slide. I appreciate it. Thank you. So yeah, PG submitted the revision to the NRC. We got a transmittal letter explaining what the changes were, and those changes were that there was an update to an organizational chart to confirm with the changes to the quality assurance program, which is another plan that the ISFSI has that we don't necessarily regulate. They incorporated some language to speak to the administrative rules about safeguards information. They removed search requirements specific to ISFSI specialists to comply with directions from the NRC. And they revised some figures to update new security features installed at the site, including a new vehicle barrier system, and then revised their procedures for summoning off-site assistance in the event that there is an emergency at the site. As you all know, the security plan itself contains safeguards information, so we're not in possession of the plan itself. Mark Reese, the council's or the department's radiological emergency coordinator, went to the site, inspected the document, and also conducted a physical inspection of the security features. And if you could advance the slide, please. And so at the February meeting, Mr. Reese came back and reported to the council that he had reviewed, he didn't have any concerns, and he was satisfied that the security plan met the requirements for public safety and site security. We'll also note that the NRC considered this to be a change that did not decrease the effectiveness of the plan. So while they don't conduct a more formal review of those sorts of plans, they certainly have the power to. And we've been in contact with our NRC liaison and haven't heard any concerns about this particular plan. Great. So if I can have the next slide, please. So based on that report, like at the last meeting, we recommend that the council find that revision 9 to the ISFSI security plan does not appear to have adversely affected the effectiveness of the plan, and that the plan continues to provide adequate provisions for the protection of public health and safety. And we recommend that council authorize staff to issue a joint statement summarizing these findings with the director in compliance with the rules in OAR Chapter 345, Division 70. What we didn't have for you last time was a draft of that statement. We do have that now. It was included in your council packet, and I can pull that up on the screen if there's any questions or if you'd like to work on it at all. The current draft has been reviewed both by the department and by the director herself. That doesn't mean you can't make changes if you want. So with that, yeah, your options are to approve the revision and authorize the statement as presented in the staff report, approve the revision and authorize the statement with changes to the statement, or you can reject the revision and basically ask PG for information. If you do want more information on the security plan itself, either Mark can provide non-safeguards information at a public meeting, or the council can hold a non-public meeting to probably discuss the changes directly with PG.
Thank you, Mr. Clark, is there anyone that would like to have the document, the letter pulled up, the joint letter pulled up just to
No,
see
thank
one
you.
line? Okay, no? Okay, no need. So is there any discussion before we have a motion?
Yeah.
Counselor Grail?
This is Marcy. I just want to say thank you for following up. I think the idea for at least myself was basically the impression that we just kicked the ball. I think we've heard rubber stamp numerous times today. So knowing that the letter was done and we actually saw it solved all my concerns. So appreciate that.
Thank you, Counselor Grail. Don't see any other indication of a question or comment other than Secretary Cornett. Oh, sorry. Motion. Yeah, so we're ready for a motion. Counselor Grail.
Madam Vice Chair, I move that the council approve the modifications to the security plan for the Trojan Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation and authorize staff to issue the joint statement with the director in accordance with OAR 345-070-0030 sub 1 as presented by staff.
Is there a second? Counselor Byer,
Second the motion.
Mr. Secretary?
Ann Byer,
Yes.
Cindy Condon,
Yes.
Richard Devlin,
Yes.
Marcy Grail,
Yes.
Katie Hines.
Yes.
Motion carries, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, which is an opportunity for public comment. And this time is reserved for the public to address the council regarding any item within council jurisdiction that is not otherwise closed for comment. Nancy, do we have anyone signed up to provide public comment in the room?
Larry, did you want to make a comment?
So it looks like we only have one person in the room. So Irene, you are up.
This will be quick. Irene Gilbert, 2310 Adams Avenue, LeGrand, Oregon. And I just wanted to clarify as far as procedure with the,
Irene, can you talk? Sorry,
oh,
but can you speak into the mic more?
oh, okay. As far as the procedure going on with, I had asked for a reconsideration of decision of the council, and that was the scope of my request. And because of the request for change of jurisdiction, it involved a decision from the Oregon Supreme Court, which basically I just wanted to say that the request was clearly about a decision of the council. It was not about challenging the issuance of a site certificate. So any decision about jurisdiction for a site certificate, I broke it down and said, this is about only conditions in the site certificate. There is a site certificate. There are two site certificates. Both are valid. I am challenging a decision related to what conditions are included. So I just wanted to make that clear that the decision that the mandamus was to be determined on was what the jurisdiction is when the issue is about site certificate conditions. I've never challenged that there is a legitimate site certificate and amended site certificate. So broadening the response to the mandamus request, denying it, is not appropriate. It was only there is a legitimate site certificate. Okay? Does that make sense?
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Nancy, anybody on WebEx?
At this point, I do not. Oh, hold on. We have Mr. Troy Jones with his hand raised. Hold on a moment, and I will unmute your mic. Mr. Jones, your mic is open. You're ready to comment.
Thank you.
And Mr. Jones, could you state your name and spell it for us?
Yes, good morning. My name's Troy Jones, TROYJONES.
Thank you.
I live at 22335 Gap Road, Harrisburg, Oregon. The reason I'm here today, Madam Vice Chair, and fellow council members, is because I live near a location where there was a notice of intent issued for a Muddy Creek Energy Park, which is a 1,600 acre solar facility that they want to put on exclusive farm use properties. I attended last month's February meeting, and I wanted to follow up again this month. And I may sound like I'm repeating myself, but in essence, I do have an ask at the end. So if you would be patient with me. In a time when equality is so important to all of us and all types of different life aspects, I still find it difficult to understand how or why the Energy Facility Siting Council has been provided the ability to site industrial solar facilities on zoned areas not suitable for the proposed project without being required to determine if there are other areas perhaps more suitable that would not require a land use exception and can accommodate the proposed land use. The inequality is the fact that the Land Conservation Development Commission does have such a requirement. And to be more specific, last month I didn't go into the details, but currently ORS 469.504 Section 2 does not require the Energy Facility Siting Council to determine if alternative siting locations exist, which would not require a land use exception. This law actually supersedes ORS 197.732, which does require this consideration. It's my position that ORS 469.504 subsection 2 does need to be changed to contain the same considerations as that the Land Conservation Development Commission must follow. So my ask here is I'm just curious if this is something that the Energy Facility Siting Council can consider having a rules advisory committee review, or if this is something that I need to pursue from a legislative perspective.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Secretary.
For the record, Todd Cornett. I think, whether or not a rule could be added in the Energy Facility Siting Council's rules, we would have to evaluate. Certainly, the more clear way of doing it would be a statutory change going through the legislature. That would be, the more clear avenue in regards to whether we can do it through rulemaking. That I'm not sure if that would have to be evaluated.
So just what I heard you say is it would be easier to go through the legislative function.
I'm not sure it would be easier, but I would say that's maybe the clearer path.
Okay, clearer path. Okay, got it. Well, thank you, Mr. Cornett. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Is that all, or do you want to go on?
No, for today, I think that's adequate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your
Nancy,
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do not see any other hands raised at this time, but I will go ahead and just remind people again how to participate if they wanted to make a comment. So if you are on the, if you're on the webinar, you're going to hover your hand over the participant list and you can click your raise your hand icon and that will raise your hand to make a comment. If you are on the phone, you're going to press *3 to raise your hand to make a comment, and then you can go ahead and press *3 to lower your hand after you've finished. I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, I think we'll move on. Our next item on the agenda is the Boardman Solar Energy project termination of site certificate, and Secretary Cornett, Assistant Director of Siting, and the Council Secretary will proceed.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. For the record, Todd Cornett, Assistant Director for Siting at the Oregon Department of Energy and Secretary to the Energy Facilities Siting Council. So as indicated, this is the request by the department to terminate the Boardman Solar Energy Project site certificate. Next slide, please, Nancy. So you can see on the screen, there's more details in the staff report, so I'm not going to go through all the details about the project, but briefly, it's a 75 megawatt solar PV project on 798 acres. It includes related and supporting facilities. The main components of the project were approved in North Morrow County, just south of I-84. And then there was also a related and supporting 115 kV transmission line. I think that was largely in North, or approved in North Gillum County. The certificate holder is Boardman Solar Energy LLC, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Invenergy Solar Development LLC, which in turn is a wholly owned subsidiary of Invenergy LLC. Next slide, please. Same, this is not all of the details associated with the timeline of the project, but it's kind of a summary. So you can see the project was originally approved by council in February 2018. At that point, they had a beginning construction deadline of February 23rd, 2021. Prior to that deadline, they submitted requests for Amendment 1 to extend the beginning construction deadline, cited that they did not have a power purchase agreement at the time. Council approved that in September 2021, giving an extension to February 23rd, 2024. Late last year, Sarah Esterson, Senior Policy Advisor with the Oregon Department of Energy, sent the certificate holder a reminder email that their certificate was going to expire unless they submitted another request for a time extension. They responded about 2 months later, indicating that they did not intend to pursue a time extension. Rather, they intended to let the site certificate expire and then propose the project at the county level based upon changes at the legislature, giving the counties larger amounts of acreage in terms of what their jurisdictional thresholds or their jurisdictional abilities were in terms of solar projects. The one thing that's in the staff report that's not on the slide is that in their original application, the entire project was in the record. They had indicated that the entire project location was high value farmland. By definition, the project is located within the Columbia Valley AVA, and then based upon certain slope and aspect ratios within that geographic area, properties are high value farmland. So they'd indicated in their application materials the entire project was high value farmland. Now they've indicated, well, they've done more evaluation, more research, and it is not. And so the current threshold for FSEC jurisdiction on high value farmland is 240 acres. So if they want to proceed with the project at the county level, they have to justify that it is 240 acres or less of high value farmland. They have submitted a jurisdictional determination with more details about the slope and aspect. We have not conducted that evaluation yet. Regardless, so that's just more information for you to be aware of, but it's not germane to your evaluation today. That's just if they want to move forward with this project, who would have jurisdiction. So, and then the last thing on, sorry, can you go back once? So again, going back to the deadline, they did not begin construction as that's defined in statute by February 23rd, 2024. Therefore, the site certificate has expired. Next slide, please. So the applicable rules related to this are on the screen. And as you can see, based on Rule 0313, as well as the condition in the site certificate, Gen GS01, so general condition, and that's of the first amended site certificate because the certificate holder did not begin construction by the established date. As I just indicated, the site certificate has expired. Now, based upon the other rule, 0110, when a site certificate has expired, the council shall issue an order terminating the site certificate. So that's effectively where we're at today. So they have lost their ability. It's expired. So they cannot begin construction. They cannot move forward with this project. Really what remains is the council's terminating the site certificate. And you can see the options that are on here. So the first is to approve termination of the site certificate. Attached to the staff report is a draft order, which does that. And so if you approve through a vote today of that site certificate termination, the chair or the vice chair would sign that draft order. We would take the draft off it, and that would be a final order. You would sign the termination order, and that would conclude it. Option 2 would be to vote to terminate the site certificate, but if there are additional changes in that draft order that you feel are appropriate to make, you could do that as well. And then thirdly, if there is more information that you need, you can defer termination, voting on the termination today. Again, that doesn't change the fact that the site certificate has expired. They cannot move forward. So at some point, even if you would like to defer it, that you will need to terminate the site certificate. And last slide is your deliberation, or certainly if you have any questions of me.
Members of the council, any questions, comments before a motion? I just want to clarify something with respect to your comment about the review that will be made. If that review comes up with the different, you say, no, this is high value, then is there anything, does that affect our timing with termination at all?
No.
Okay.
No, those are, again, I think it was important to raise just because they had indicated to us the reasoning behind it, that they intend to go to the county level. Wanted to express that to you, but also let you know that we've not come to the conclusion that actually the county is the appropriate jurisdiction. It may well be. We have just not conducted that evaluation yet. So, I mean, the two options are, we determine that, yes, they're correct in the information they provide. The site does not include, more than 240 acres of high value farmland, in which case it would be appropriate to go to the county for review. And if not, then it would remain FSEC jurisdictional. And if they wanted to continue with the project as it is, they would have to come back and submit a notice of intent and reinitiate the entire process.
Okay, that is what I was looking for. Thank you very much. Given no comments or deliberation, is there a motion? Councillor Grail.
Madam Vice Chair, I move that the council terminate the Boardman Solar Energy Project Site Certificate as presented and recommended by staff.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Councillor Byer. Oh, thank you. Councillor Devlin. I didn't see your hand. Sorry about that. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Secretary, can you call the vote?
Katie Ime,
Yes.
Richard Devlin,
Yes.
Cindy Condon,
Yes.
Ann Byer,
Yes.
Marcy Grail.
Yes.
Motion carries, Madam Chair.
Thank you all, and thank you to the council members and staff and people who joined web. Oh,
Just once you're concluded, I have one last statement to make.
okay, and members of the public who joined us certainly in person and through webinar or on the phone, thank you very much. And before we adjourn,
I just want to express appreciation to Chris Clark. So obviously he had the agenda item last night. But he pitched in today on 2 agenda items that, are, related, softly related to his job. So obviously his history on rulemaking made sense for him to pitch in for Tom. And then, the other issue is more compliance issue. So I just want to say thank you for taking the lead on those. It was much appreciated.
And our vice chair having to chair act like the very first time after she was elected.
Well
So
done.
Way to go, Cindy.
It's a good thing there was a script. So, thank you. And with that, it is 11:04 a.m. and at this time, we will adjourn the March 21st, 22nd, 2024 meeting of the Energy Facility Signing Council. Thank you.